I'm a technologist, and like most technologists and scientists, I do my best work in the corporate world for the most part. I had been in London 3 years ago, and I was on the little capitalist hamster wheel, and I was coming back through Gatwick Airport, and I saw a picture on the big screen. It was September 2015, and it was the picture of the boy on the beach. That picture floored me, and I came back to Dublin and I just decided I'm going to do whatever it is I can. I'm not a natural fit to humanitarianism. I have no background in humanitarianism, aside from being human. So I took a look at the space, and I thought I had some experience in two-sided marketplaces. So I thought something like Airbnb for refugees, that could work. So I registered the domain, refugeebnb.com. Technologists do. Yay, we're doing it. We have a domain. I didn't know then it'd be another 2 years before we actually placed somebody into accommodation. So that weekend we had a hackathon, lots of amazing volunteers, Ireland, America, Canada, Singapore. And we did what we could in a weekend, and we built, the bones of a platform. We did it in 34 languages. The vision was a global database of people who were willing to give a spare room to refugees. And people started pledging spare rooms. And then we had to pause for a minute. The saying in technology, move fast and break things. It's not really okay when you're dealing with life and death, you know? So we took a step back and we started just assessing the landscape, all of the actors, the NGOs, the grassroots charities, and the scale of the problem. So it's 28 million international refugees and asylum seekers. It seems like a really big number. It's about what goes through Grand Central Station in New York in a month. It is a big number, but we deal with big numbers. I think there's like 2 billion portions of Coca-Cola consumed every day. There's a supply chain, there's a distribution chain. Things happen at scale. I do think it's a big number, but I don't think it's an inconceivable number to address things from a humanitarian perspective. We're 7.4 billion people on the planet, so if that little green man there is our 28 million refugees, international refugees and asylum seekers, that's the amount of people there are, about 1 in 260 in the world. I want to counter that right-wing rhetoric that we get all the time, that we have to protect what ours, we have to put up walls, we're going to be like overrun or something like that. It's just not true. Those Donald Trumpisms that say this is the way, that they just breed on fear. Migration has always happened. Migration will continue to happen. People are basically going to move that way in the world because climate migration is coming. I know where that picture of the boy on the beach was taken, and that family were trying to cross from Turkey to Greece. At its closest, that's about 8-10 miles. Any of us can get on a ferry, runs multiple times every day, pay about €25, and we won't die. Whereas people who don't have a passport will pay maybe $1,000 per person, and they'll get on an overloaded boat, and 14,000 died in the Mediterranean since that picture was taken, since 2015. So that's a piece of paper that's the difference between life and death. We have these 7.4 billion on the planet. We've drawn these imaginary lines. We call them borders. And people die because of these borders. And the rich people tell the poor people, these poor people are coming to take your stuff. Maybe it's not the poor people taking the other poor people's stuff. Maybe it's the rich people. I think we just have to totally readjust our perspective on this. So after our initial hackathon, we started to do some proper requirements gathering and came at it from a more grounded kind of perspective. I wanted to thank all the humanitarians, the grassroots organizations, the NGOs that bothered to engage with us. We've done a lot of listening, lots of listening over the last 3 years. And the concept we've settled on is a global humanitarian database, NGO managed. So The Red Cross, we're working closely with the Irish Red Cross. We are accumulating a database of accommodation, goods and services. So anybody in Ireland who has a spare room, they would like to pledge for a refugee, redcross.ie/pledge. We also moved into goods and services because we realised we can't just put people into accommodation without the appropriate wraparound supports. So we've kind of a couple of projects ongoing now. We've got this humanitarian database. We realised once we got into this that if you're going to place people into homes, then you need to have some kind of a case management element. So we now have 4 case managers, and we have obviously enabled them with a case management system where we can keep information about people and keep track of who's where and that kind of thing. And then the final piece of it was an open source project. So we've created this software for free. We're working with the Red Cross at the moment, but we wanted to make sure that it remained free and that we could give it away to other people if we wanted. So we're maintaining an open source project at the same time. That's the register of pledges there now. I think we have 155 clients, mostly Syrian refugees. We have 120 we're giving accommodation support to. Half of them are in pledged accommodation. So pledged accommodation isn't appropriate for everyone, but it's particularly good for young single people who need to improve their language skills. Living with an Irish family can be really helpful in that regard. We got a massive amount of pledges that we actually didn't use. I think we had about 600 in the early days, but we had an extensive screening process, and the reason we had to reject a lot of them is because they were too rural, and it's just not appropriate to put somebody, alone into a rural area like that. It's fine if you have a car, but it can be very, very challenging if you don't. So that's where we're at with the Register of Pledges. I feel like I'm obliged to just bring up the data protection here. When we got into this, we have a database of people who want to pledge accommodation. At its worst, that's a database of sympathisers. If you were in different countries, let's say even Hungary or Greece now, there's some humanitarians who are locked up in Greece for helping refugees. So we are mindful of how sensitive this information is. And then once we got into case management, we started collecting refugee data, which is about as sensitive as it gets because it's sensitive data on vulnerable people. So one of the reasons we've chosen the Red Cross as a partner is because they own this data. We as volunteers don't, and I think we just need to be mindful that it is a powerful concept, and I don't think it should be owned by a private company at any point, and I actually don't think it should be owned by a government either. It may be the Red Cross that's worked well for us in Ireland. They have some of their fundamental principles include neutrality, impartiality, ideal kind of principles for a data controller. And I'll just finish with a friend of mine, Ahmed, and he is in a Red Cross house now in Dublin. And he saw the picture of the boy at the beach as well. And he was in Turkey at the time, and he was imminently getting on one of these boats. And it's lovely to see now, 3 years later, thankfully, he's one of the people who did get here. And he's embracing Irish life, and I'm delighted to call him my friend. And there's been times this project has been challenging. It's the kind of volunteer work where you're not really seeing the results very quickly. You're behind a keyboard at 3 o'clock in the morning, drinking coffee and trying to stay awake. But I look around and I look at my friends who also happen to be refugees. I look at how challenging integration is for them. I look at their determination, their resilience, and I just keep going with this project. So, yeah, thank you very much.